adjudicator is Ms. Lowen. The topic of this debate is that parking spaces for prams is unnecessary. The affirmative team seated to my right is from Glenunga International High School. The negative team seated to my left is from St. Mary's College. The speaking time for this debate is 4 minutes. A single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time, and a double bell will sound at the speaking time. A continuous bell may be rung 30 seconds after the speaking time, in which case the speaker must sit down immediately. Please ensure that your mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Cruz Cho.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for this debate is that parking spaces for prams are unnecessary. We define the topic as parking spaces for prams as specialized car parks for guardians of infants or young children. These parks have a larger area and are generally closer to the shopping center or facility. They may or may not require a permit. We define unnecessary as simply being unneeded, a luxury, not a necessity. For the purpose of this debate, we are limiting our context to South Australia. We, the affirmative team, believe that this statement is undeniably true. Today's first speaker, I will be speaking to you about the problematic and confusing legislation laws surrounding pram parking, including the fact that the provision of pram parking is not a legal requirement and thus cannot be regulated. Our second speaker, Hanson, will be talking about how pram parking spaces reduce the value to those who absolutely need and require them, such as our growing aging population or those with temporary injuries. He shall also be proposing some alternate suggestions that the space of pram parking spaces should be used for instead. Our third speaker, Ishan, will rebut and sum up our team case. I shall be discussing 2 points. My first point is that there are no proper legal obligations for local businesses to provide pram parking spaces. Pram parks are not an essential necessity. According to South Australian legislation on the Private Parking Act of 1986, updated in 2014, car parks, big and small, have no legal requirement to provide parking spaces for parents with prams. In the eyes of the law, these pram parking spaces are not necessary, and this means that they are inherently problematic to regulate and enforce. Pram parking spaces are a courtesy and a luxury, not an essential necessity that all families with a child should need to have. There is technically no legal obligation to prevent a person without a pram or child to park in a pram parking space if there is no permit required. As there is no legal obligation, it is in fact the shopping centre's management who decide how they would like to enforce parent parking rules. This is just a courtesy given to parents by the owners. So, while the car park management can ask a driver without a pram or child to vacate their parking space, it is not enforceable by law to require the driver to leave their spot. Now to my second point, discussing the practicality of pram parking and the inconsistencies of pram parking. In South Australia, there are hundreds of thousands of car parks, 44,700 parking spaces in North Adelaide and Adelaide CBD alone. It cannot be expected that this law is maintained in every single car park. Pram parking permits is only required in 2 places in Adelaide, and not every parent will have a permit. According to numerous parent forums, many parents aren't even aware that permits are required. Permits are only required at Mununpara and Elizabeth shopping centres, but their policy is not overtly advertised. This inconsistency is not only confusing, but also extremely unfair to clueless parents due to the fact that according to the Essential Kids Forum, there's a fine of $67 for anyone who parks within a pram parking space without a permit. According to an Australian lifestyle website, a concerned mother also discussed the practicality of this ban. She told the story and questioned if having a baby seat in the car but no baby meant that they could still park there. Were they picking up a child? Were they taking advantage of the spare parking space? These questions are something this law cannot answer, and the confusion for many parents isn't worth the benefits of saving 1 minute of walking. As they described, we are not the moral police, and there could be a billion reasons as why they are parked there. It shouldn't be the responsibility of civilians, instead the responsibility of the government. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, pram parking spaces are inessential and another unnecessary spoon-fed convenience that we really don't need. If they truly were necessary, then the government would provide consistent legislation to enforce this as to do with all the other parking permits. Stated by Pythagoras, ability and necessity dwell near each other. If parents have the ability to walk the extra 50 metres, then pram parking spaces are not a necessity. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Emma Munchenberg.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parking spaces for prams are unnecessary. We, the negative team, believe this statement is false. We define tonight's topic as parking spaces for prams. Car park spaces generally located close to entrances of buildings. They are wider than an average car park. We define unnecessary as not a necessity, not needed, or not essential. We, the negative team, believe that wider and more accessible parks for parents with prams and small children are definitely not unnecessary. Today, as first speaker, I'll be talking to you about safety and how car parks pose specific risks for toddlers and small children. I'll also be talking about the possible economic benefits for pram parks for shop owners. Ella, our second speaker, will be talking about the fact that although pram parks are not legally mandated, they are necessary. She will be comparing the importance of pram parks to the importance of courtesy and common manners. She will also be talking about how pram parking can alleviate some of the pressure on modern-day parents. Tess, our third speaker, will rebut and summarise our team case. The first speaker has said not enforced by law, so we disagree because this pram park aren't enforced by law and doesn't deem them unnecessary. An example of concept like this is manners. Manners aren't enforced by law, but is expected that they are used because they are necessary. My first point is about safety. Pram parks are necessary because they enable parents to get children, toddlers and babies safely in and out of cars and into shops and other buildings. According to news.com.au, on June the 18th this year, 2 sisters and their grandmother on the Gold Coast were hit by a car, resulting in a 6-year-old death. These tragedies happen because toddlers don't understand how dangerous car parks are. Furthermore, most children can't sense danger in traffic. They can't see oncoming traffic, they have tunnel vision and they can't hear if a car is coming, they just go. Furthermore, according to an article in kidspot.com, a new survey to come out of the UK confirms that 93% of parents struggle to get their children in and out of their cars safely because there isn't enough room. Parents need width to open doors and manoeuvre children in and out of cumbersome, complicated 5-point harnesses. It is not surprising that the Give Me Space campaign is taking off with 3,500 followers on Facebook. The UK-based group is lobbying the government for more children and parent spaces. Pram parks are necessary because they provide safer movement for parents with prams and toddlers. Car parks that are wider and closer to entrances minimize possible danger for toddlers. Now to my second point. Pram parks are not unnecessary because they can actually be a financial benefit for shop owners. It makes sense that parents will choose a shopping centre with a pram park rather than without them because it is safer and more accessible. Therefore, in pure economic terms, they will be spending money at shops and supermarkets in these centres. The possible flow on effect means that shopping centres owners and small businesses owners may benefit from this financially. More money spent by parents in these centres means more prosperous businesses and possibly more employment. So it's a win-win situation for parents and shop owners, for pram parks are not unnecessary. So Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we the negative team most definitely believe that pram parks are not unnecessary. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Hanson White.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parking spaces for prams are unnecessary. We, the affirmative team, undeniably agree with this statement. Our first affirmative speaker, Cruz, has stated that pram parking cannot be enforced properly, with no obligation from businesses to carry out this concept. She also talks about the fact that anyone could park in these spaces, therefore reducing the concept to nothing more than a guide of morals. Tonight, I will be talking to you about the prioritization of pram parking and how there are other members of the community that could benefit more from dedicated parking spaces that have larger footprints and are closer to facilities. I will also be talking to you about the alternative options of taking your child to a shopping centre, which don't require a larger parking space. The first negative speaker claimed that pram parks, being closer to facility entrances, will help children stay out of high traffic areas for safety purposes. This is wrong, because cars should already be following speed limits, which are generally around 5 to 10 kilometers an hour. According to the Department of Infrastructure, only 14% of child pedestrian deaths in a 10-year period occurred in slow traffic areas such as car parks. And are not the fault of pram parking. 70% of child fatalities occurred at the child's home, not in a car park. Children are 5 times more likely to be run over by a parent in their own driveway than a stranger in a car park. The first negative speaker has also stated that parents need the space to remove the children and equipment from the vehicle. This might be true, however, parents aren't the only people who need larger parks. As previously mentioned, people with disabilities should be of a higher priority as they might have wheelchairs or a walker to assist with their mobility. Also, parents access their prams via the boot or rear of the vehicle, so having pram parks which are simply wider, not longer, aren't really helping. To my first point, that parents with young children shouldn't be given priority because there are other individuals that could benefit more from dedicated parking spaces. You might ask, we already have parking spots for people living with disabilities, so why not include parking spaces for parents with young children too? Well, according to the Department of Human Services in South Australia, 13.4% of the population is living with a disability. This justifies the few handicap parking spots that you might see in a shopping centre parking lot. However, parents with young children make up only 5.7% of the population. The problem here lies in the fact that there are members of our society that aren't eligible for a handicap parking permit but could still use a closer parking spot. For example, the elderly often struggle to walk even short distances, people who are temporarily injured will have trouble moving, and even pregnant women are also facing mobility issues when compared to healthy parents and children. Not to mention that on average, there are always more pram parking spaces than handicap parking spots. Parents already have prams to transport these kids from their cars to facilities. I mean, it's in the name, pram parking. So why should these parking spots be dedicated to parents with young children when there are members of our society that could use them more? This is an unnecessary use of this area. Following on, my next point is that there are other ways for prams for parents to transport young children that don't require a pram. It's 2018, and we have baby harnesses and slings that allow you to hold an infant on your own body without needing to constantly keep your hands on a pram and transport them around. This in return also makes it easier to maneuver around a busy shopping centre and frees up your hands. Baby slings are also easier to carry around in your car and are much cheaper than prams. Even if a pram was completely necessary and you needed to bring one to the shopping centre, you could use an umbrella stroller. These are foldable and have a tiny footprint, around half the size of a normal pram. You could easily set these up on the side without needing an unnecessary pram parking spot that hogs up space. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, pram parking is undeniably unnecessary and does not serve an important role in our community. There are other members of our society that could use it more, and it's very hard to justify the amount of effort put in to create these pram parking spaces when there are so many other options compared to using a large and bulky pram in the first place. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Ella South.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parking spaces for prams are unnecessary. We, the negative team, truly believe that this statement is incorrect and false. As the second speaker for the negative team, I will be speaking about the importance of courtesy and manners which are necessary for our society to function smoothly. I'll be speaking about the stress of modern day parents and how they're continually multitasking and that pram parks are really important for them, so they can easily be able to quickly access the shops with their young child safely getting in and out the car. I will also be speaking about the damage to cars this makes if the parks are not wide enough. The second speaker on the affirmative team has said that disabled parks are at a higher priority than pram parks. We disagree because disabled parks are not more important than pram parks, and pram parks are not more important than disabled parks. This debate isn't about differing between which one is more important, it's about understanding why they are both needed and accommodating for those needs. The speaker from the second affirmative side has said that pram parks are overtaking disabled parks. We disagree because the assumption that pram parks are overtaking disabled parks is simply untrue. If this was the case, don't you think it would make more sense that normal parks are overtaking pram parks? Also, according to coffeestops.com, there are twice as many disabled parks than pram parks, so the assumption that pram parks are overtaking disabled parks is simply untrue. Another point to consider is that these stressed parents deserve courtesy of the parks, just as each disabled person does. Speaker 2 on the affirmative team has also said that pram parks are wider, not longer. We disagree because even though the pram is usually located in the boot of the car, it is important to realise that the child is situated in the back seat of the car in a special harness seat. This seat can be accessed by parents without the wider space of a pram park. Therefore, the pram park allows the child's safe departure from a vehicle and provide parents with the reassurance that the child is safe. Speaker 1 has said that pram parks are not enforced by law, so they probably can't be explored. We disagree because just because pram parks aren't enforced by law doesn't mean they are unnecessary. An example of concept like this is manners. Manners aren't enforced by law, but it is expected that they are used because they are necessary. It comes down to manners and courtesy. For my first point, we acknowledge that pram parks are not a legal requirement for shop owners to have. However, we still believe that they are necessary. As a point of comparison here, there are other things that are not enforced by law, but are still encouraged and still necessary. For example, let's look at common manners and courtesy. Although they're not legally required to use manners or be courteous, it is something that is considered necessary because it enables society to be cohesive. To extend on this common courtesy, if you are sitting in a wheelchair spot on the bus and someone on a wheelchair comes in, they need a spot to park their chair. But it is not illegal to stay seated, but people get up because it's common courtesy and it's polite. Parents with prams rely on the common courtesy of other people, especially shop owners and employees, in providing access to pram parks. Although it's not a legal requirement, it makes life so much easier for parents and can be considered just like common courtesy and manners as a necessity. This proves, ladies and gentlemen, that pram parks are indeed necessary. For my second point, we the negative team truly believe that pram parks are necessary because modern day parents are faced with so many challenges and stresses that pram parks are generally a solution to what is a very stressful outing with young children. When parents use pram parks, it gives them somewhat relief that their child will be safe upon entering and exiting the car. Modern day parents are always busy with multitasking and attending their child's everyday commitment, which proves that modern day parents are always on their feet. Needing to quickly drive to the shops with the child can be a very stressful experience, especially when you have a time frame. Being able to give yourself enough space to fit the pram on the side of the car so you can safely and carefully unclip the multiple seat belts to your child's booster seats. In conclusion, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, for the reasons of courtesy, manners and modern day parents, it is clear to say that parking spaces for prams are necessary. We, the negative team, most truly believe that pram parks are very necessary because it helps and protects children as well as benefits shop owners. Thank you and good night.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Ishan Oak.
Good evening, Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, the topic for this evening's debate is that pram parking spaces are unnecessary, and we, the affirmative team, agree with this statement. As third speaker, I'll be reiterating the valid points made by our first speaker, Cruz, and our second speaker, Hanson. However, I would like to begin by rebutting the flawed arguments posed by the negative team first and second speaker. Now, the first speaker for the negative has attempted to explain to you that it is safe for children. It's the responsibility of the parent to look after their children and the responsibility of the driver to watch out for people who are walking so that nobody is harmed. If there is a reckless driver and a parent who is not properly taking care of their child, it is more than likely that the child will be hit, whether it's outside of the store or in the middle of the car park. Further, areas where cars are travelling at low speeds, like car parks, only account for 14% of vehicle-related deaths, according to the Department of Infrastructure. The parking spaces are unnecessary and do very little from a child safety perspective. If people take care of our youth, these parking spaces will be rendered useless. Now, they've also spoken about the benefits it has for institutions. It may be true that it attracts parents with babies. However, it can also be bad for business. These spaces take more room and restrict business and can be better utilised. Therefore, it may not necessarily be a good thing, especially for businesses who are not targeting this audience, but others. Now, they've also attempted to explain to you that parents need the spaces. This statement may be true. However, there are people who need them more, as our second speaker already spoke about. The whole point of having a pram is that you're able to transport your child from A to B whilst keeping them safe. Pram parking spaces give parents with prams priority parking, which they don't need, as a pram is already enough to transport a child 100 metres or so across a car park. Other people do need them more. Now, they also spoke about it being a necessary courtesy for the institution to accommodate for the needs of parented babies. This is completely incorrect. Businesses have the right to accommodate their target audiences in order for them to maximise their profits. If this means not having larger pram parks so that more customers can fit, so be it. The business will take the profit or the loss either way. Therefore, it should be their decision. Now, they spoke about it not being between disabled parks and prams. And in an ideal world, this would be true. However, there is a limited amount of space, and we have spoken about how parents don't really need the space. Other people may need it more. Now, our first speaker, Cruz, spoke about the fact that they are not legal necessities, but luxuries. The fact that they're difficult to enforce because anybody can park there, and that they are inconsistent and therefore confusing to the customers. Our second speaker, Hanson, spoke about the priority parking spaces being more important for other people, like elderly citizens, disabled and handicapped individuals, and pregnant women. He also spoke about alternative options for using prams at the supermarket. For example, having clothing that ties the infant to your body. In conclusion, we, the Affirmative team, are completely against pram parking spaces. I would like to draw your attention to a quote from Plato. Necessity is the mother of all good ideas, and that mother does not need a pram parking space. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Tasha. Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that parking spaces for prams are unnecessary. We, the negative team, strongly believe the statement is false. Tonight, as third negative speaker, I'll be summarising our team's case, but first I'll point out some of the opposition's errors. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that they are not legally enforced, which means that other people could take advantage. Yes, they are not legally enforced, but as our second speaker earlier said, it does come down to courtesy. As like many other things that are not legally enforced, they're not illegally enforced that we need in order for society to function well. I will go on about this in my summarisation. She also talked to you about how the shop owners can't ask people to move if they are parked there. Actually, this is not true, for the shopping owners can legally ask the person parked there to move and or fine them. It is not illegal for them to park there, but as it is the shop owner's property, they can ask the person to move, as I have said. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that it reduces space for elderly and disabled, but this is not the case.
for disabled parks are double the amount of pram parks, and there are plenty of the parks close to the store which elderly can park so they don't have too much space to walk. The second speaker has also talked to you about how there are other ways to carry a baby besides prams. Yes, this is true. There are still ways to carry your child without one, but parents still need to open the door really wide and lean in to be able to unclip their children. And this, in a normal space, this is very hard to do without hitting the other car next to them with the door. But this is not a problem in pram parks, for it has a wider space. The third affirmative speaker has talked to you about how it's the parents' responsibility to watch out for their children. Yes, this is true. Parents need to be responsible for their children. But children have tunnel vision, so once they are out of the car, they often run. And with this tunnel vision, it will restrict them from seeing the oncoming car. But pram parks being closer to the store, it means that children do not need to get up and run across a road to get to the store. They just need to get up and they're at the sidewalk. I will now summarise my team's case. Our first speaker, Emma, talked to you about how pram parks are necessary because they provide safety for the parents with toddlers. Toddlers often have a mind of their own and have tunnel vision. Unfortunately, in Australia, one child per week is injured in a motor vehicle-related accident. 90% of these children that are hit with a car are either seriously injured or are killed. Toddlers don't understand how dangerous car parks are. They don't stop, look and listen for oncoming traffic. Most children can't sense danger in traffic because they have tunnel vision and they can't see oncoming cars. Car parks are particularly problematic because cars can be obscured and car parks are often poorly lit. Pram parks are located close to the shopping entrances, making the journey in and out of a car shorter and therefore safer. Emma also talked to you about how pram parks can be of financial benefit to shop owners. Parents are more likely to choose a shopping centre with pram parks rather than one without, because it is safer and more accessible. If parents know that a store does not have pram parks, they are less likely to go there because they don't want to risk the lives of their children. Shop owners would consider pram parks useful and necessary to ensure they have a lot of customers. Our second speaker, Ella, has talked about common courtesy should be in place. Pram parks are not legally binding, but there are many things that are not legally binding that are important for society to function. For example, it is commonly accepted as courteous for younger people to offer their seats to elderly on the bus. This is not legally binding, but they do because it's safer for an older person to travel while seated. Ella also talked to you about the busy life of modern-day parents and how pram parks make that already stressful trip a little less stressful. And being able to give yourself giving yourself space to fit the pram on the side of the car so you can carefully unclip the children and get them in and out. Modern-day parents are busy juggling work, children and cleaning. Pram parks are necessary because they make their trip a lot less stressful. So Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, we the negative team strongly believe that pram parks are in fact necessary.